Welcome everyone to another session of the 15th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales, I'm your moderator. Our session is, are we just reviewing the syllabus today? Creating graphic and interactive ADA compliant syllabi. Our presenter is Amy Dye Reeves from Texas Tech University, the Red Raiders. She is an associate librarian within the Texas Tech Libraries. She's also the liaison to the College of Education and Department of History. She provides information literacy, instructional sessions, and workshops. And Amy, we're glad to have you do this. Take it away.
All right, thank you so much. So I'm excited to be providing this content with you today. If you have any questions, I'll have my contact there at the bottom, but just kind of learn some more today of what we're really focusing on. I actually had this for another conference, which was the Online Learning Consortium. So that's why it says November. It's the same kind of content that we went over there that I will present here as well. So one of the really the questions that I have is, have you ever used a graphic syllabus? If so, was it a success? Was it a failure? Just kind of think about those things. If you've done that, perhaps in the past or not. We're going to go over what is a graphic syllabus, as well as ADA compliancy and issues. We're going to talk about some strategies for inclusion and best practices, as well as a Jamboard activity if we have some time, or you would like to maybe try this later on your own and what that would look at later. So one of the traditional syllabus, this is kind of a snapshot of what mine, traditionally looks like. Of course, it's not in a graphic format, but it's kind of that traditional. I actually teach a 1 credit information literacy course. And really what that is getting them to learn how to use resources effectively and efficiently, and, really focusing on valid research and not things they're just finding on Google that don't work. So that's pretty much what my class is. And so you can kind of see what I had, just a little bit information here. So I like to show this little graphic here. And it's just really, that is, what do we cover in class last week? It's in the syllabus, right? What's your late policy, homework policy? It's in the syllabus. When are your office hours? That's in the syllabus. How will my grade be, put together? It's in the syllabus, right? So this seems like this is something that oftentimes we're telling students, we're constantly saying, hey, go check the syllabus, go look at the syllabus. Oftentimes I see that throughout when using my sessions. But the traditional syllabus that we have, we do have to include those information with students with disabilities, as well as civility and all that other information that's really important for them to have throughout their session. One of the images that I worked with another professor on for a class is like first year writing. And so they were like, I was talking to them about this and they go, oh yeah, I've been using a lot of image-based syllabus to actually get my faculty, my students involved with the course. And so they would have the course and I was like, oh, this is great. And there's a table of contents. I was like, oh, that's really nice, because you can see the course description, your course values, your grades, what have students said about the class, which I was like, oh, that's really awesome, because I never thought about putting all of this information in the right direction. So when I first was thinking about understanding graphic syllabi, when I was wanting to first look at this, I looked at a lot of different research, and really that comes back to providing that bigger picture. What is the course? Those content, structure, or knowledge, and looking at the integrated whole, and just really looking for that deeper understanding of that course material, really making sure that it's organized in a logical manner and not just completely text-based the whole time, but also having some other element, because a lot of times when you're working with students, some of them have intellectual disabilities, for example. And so that might be very difficult for them to look at all the textual information at one time. When you're looking at your knowledge structures, that really enables students to have that better process and comprehension and retain the information throughout. Really, when I'm looking at this one statement at the bottom, new material is not integrated, but not looking into the aggravated facts and terms, but looking into the pre-existing organization of learned knowledge. So I looked at a lot of different research before kind of delving into it, but also looking at what other faculty were doing across campus. Really also, for me, it just reveals why you have that organized structure to your course content. When you're looking at these conceptual relationships, how are they arranged? Are you possibly using this to denote the usage of errors and just kind of showing one concept to the next concept? Really just allowing better for that communication across all text is really important. And I looked at some examples in Nielsen in 2002 and 2007 that really talked about graphic syllabi within academic courses. So it gave me a lot of ideas on what to do with possibly when I was thinking about that structure. Okay, should I use this? Should I not use this, and why? Some of the things that we all know that's important for our checklist is to have our basic course information, our sections, any extra sessions that you might have, anything that you might want to have about yourself, course support staff, of course, teaching assistants, course coverage and objectives, course readings, required course materials, and so forth. So we know that's a lot of information. Scholarship really, within a syllabi, we know that this is going to be something that we have to have for our students. So thinking in terms of even your own personal teaching and philosophy and just that empowerment that really puts all these learning objectives together is very important. So when you're working with ADA compliancy, you're making your instructions and expectations clear regarding those activities and those assignments, but giving them enough time to really go through that information and make sure that it is completely organized. Really what ADA compliancy oftentimes will ask you to do is to avoid creating those PDF documents, but posting that within your LMS and using HTML. And so a lot of times we're going to ask to do that and making it in a larger font or sans serif font on a plain background with high contrast between the text and background to be ADA compliant. Also, it's important that when you're creating these graphic really syllabi, that you're using that clear, consistent layout, and that you're also thinking about how this is being presented in content-wise, and using those headings and bulleted lists and really breaking out those paragraphs each time to facilitate and really getting away from all these large chunks of amounts of text. So oftentimes you have to have them with the statements, but breaking them up into something that's more manageable is really important to do that. When you structure your headings, listing them, using when you create them through Microsoft Word, just think about how you want to present that information. Providing those concise text descriptions of content and descriptions really help with those images, especially if you have an image, you want to have that alt text. You want to be able to see what that image is. If someone is, blind, they'd be able to, really read that information through JAWS. So make it more approachable as well, using that first person and really focusing that towards a positive language. Really encouraging students to meet with you one-on-one to go over that. And really giving them a choice of multiple ways to kind of go over that syllabus with you, and not just be the one time you do it in class. You can have them go by phone, you can have them go, email, we can do it through discussion board posts. And I do it a lot of different ways. I've actually done it through a Jamboard activity, which I'm going to talk about. But it really encourages them to look more about meeting with your syllabus and thinking more about encouraging that. But presenting that content in a different way, and maybe even possibly for you all, what makes sense is to maybe use a pie chart based on what your content is, and really to show how those grades are going to be followed throughout this semester. So when you're addressing that wide range of language skills, you're writing that content. And one of the things I see throughout, even in my work life, is just spelling out those acronyms. Making sure that they know what those words are, just defining those terms, and avoiding any, jargon or language that really just doesn't need to be there for that particular class. I like to include statements of interest to really welcome them to the class, and welcoming feedback regarding any type of accessibility issues, as well as working with the campus to really obtain anything that might be important, especially going forward if you have students who are enrolled in the courses and how important that is. Alt text, a lot of times we are doing this, but just kind of go over that a little bit more if you haven't really done that before. So images, when you have them, they're not automatically accessible to screen readers on a computer. So what you're doing is you have a really strong alt text and you're describing what you're seeing. So if I have a woman, for example, in a blazer, she's in a black blazer, describing what you're seeing on the screen. They might be holding a book. What kind of book are they holding? And why is that significant to put that image into a syllabus or even on a website, for example? So why is it there? And who is that intended audience for? So just breaking it down, so making sure that there's nothing, if someone is blind, that they would know when they're really hearing that through JAWS, that with the description there, does that make sense? And also just kind of working with Mind Disability Services folks is really great too, because I can, think about what that looks like, but they can also help me on the end of that to think, oh, maybe you need to make this more descriptive. And so that really is something else to really balance off with them. One of the things that I like to do is when I'm creating my graphic syllabi together is using a 12 to 14 point sans serif font. And I like to do that just because that is ADA compliant. It does work the best. I divide the pages into 2 columns so that each line contains 6 to 9 words, and it's not a whole lot of other phrases there, but that using that 1.5 line spacing and breaking that text into smaller paragraphs of 2 to 4 sentences. I like to make sure that I avoid that black text that is on a white background, because that can really produce a glare, especially somebody who has visual impairments. But, instead thinking about what other concepts or colors might work. So I know my university, we have on our website, we have a lot of for ADA compliancy, it tells me what colors work, what doesn't work. So when I am, putting my research guides together or my syllabi, I make sure that this all looks correct, and it is important to kind of have that. Really, oftentimes with readers with low vision, they may prefer that stark contrast of black on white. So it's just striving to format text in an accessible way. Oftentimes people opt for this bold over italics to emphasize text, but that can be, those lines can be washed out in the text. I also like to align mine to the left. And so making it difficult sometimes to find the next line, but justifying that might be overwhelming with that text blocks there. So just kind of some helpful things that I've gone over with mine. I don't like to, especially when you're going through your alt text, not just entering photography or picture of, but again, I think it has been so important for me to provide those descriptions. What is it that you're trying to look at? Go further and deeper. And so that way they can see that. Making sure that they know what is happening is really important, and not overwhelming them. And sometimes if you have so many words, they have to listen to that. And so you want to be able to have space breaks and space time for them to think, especially if they're reading such a large document and taking that in. So that's something for me always to consider. I do the universal design for a syllabus. The number one thing that I find it important is that equitable use, making sure that I know within the graphic syllabi that there is diverse learners that come from different backgrounds, technology skills, thinking about this to understand what their previous knowledge might have been with a pre-assessment. I'll ask students before the class, and will post some information about the class and just a draft version of the syllabus. It is not a final version when we first meet in class. The reason why is because we actually talk about moving pieces of the content to different places. And That doesn't mean that we're omitting content in any way. I'm actually figuring out where that statement might work better for them. Does the grade distribution need to go first? Or is this going to be in another part? They all get a vote. They all get a vote when we're putting that together. Would it be easier for you all to understand if we use a pie chart? And especially knowing if your student has ADA disabilities, knowing that ahead of time also really helps as well. But just knowing that people come from a different background with diverse learning is always something that you want to keep in mind. But having that contrast between text and background in the document is something that's really important going forward. But just making sure that everything is representative. Oftentimes when I'm putting mine together, I've seen people where I have some colleagues who will put a bunch of videos in their syllabi, and then it works for some people and it works for not some people, especially with the visual impairments. So that's something to kind of be aware of and to really think about that representation. I think that when you're putting it in a logical order and having your students have a voice is where that is going to help with multiple means of engagement, because this is their class. You're the facilitator for the class, but think about how someone is viewing your syllabus. Are they, again, you want to be able to work with your students. I have them also paired in groups to work on the syllabus on the first day. So we will take the syllabus that I have and I'll tell them to move it around on a Jamboard. We'll talk more about it and see it in a minute. But what I really like to do is to have them move the pieces around. Show me where you think this content should go. Now, if you're thinking about this particular diversity statement, how else would you think that would be best represented? So you would have maybe even the paragraph that you're required to, but what stops you from having a visual representation of that as well? What works best for your students? And getting to have that engagement, they're starting to also feel not only in your class that this is mutual respect, but also it really starts with a great rapport with your students as well, because that really sparks the start of the class. So they know that you have different ways and different opportunities of choice within the class. I always like to have that different means of representation and content and really different ways to support that understanding. Again, it's, making sure it's accessible online. Also for the class, you can also, if you feel like you want to, include a video that also will go with your syllabi. So if you have your graphic syllabi, and then, if you're away from, say, decide for this is a completely asynchronous class, you can have a video that really accompanies that with that, but they can also listen to that if they have an ADA disability. One of the things that outside of my class that I work with is we have a really strong program because I represent the College of Education for the library. So I have a lot of really programs that have to do with blindness and deafness. So I'm constantly figuring out new ways to work with them, as well as incorporating that into the course content. Having these multiple means of action and expression really help demonstrate and engage those opportunities. And, one of the things that I like to put in my syllabus is making sure that it's accessible technology and having the symbols, making sure that the structure, all of that is going to work for your class. Some of the tools that I use for ADA compliant syllabi resources, this might help you if you haven't used them, as well as the Web Accessibility Initiative, which is a great website to get more ideas. I also looked at Tulane's a university where they had a accessibility syllabi project, equal access and universal design, also about putting information for students with disabilities and creating accessible documents. That was really helpful moving forward for me when I was putting all of this together. How do students see a syllabus? Again, you're creating that what do you want them to know in class first thing? A great way to do that is going to be a concept mapped and a mind map. I also use the dual coding material, and that's response to verbal and visual, putting that together, but also thinking about their learning and retention. How do students learn, and how do they have this syllabus formulated, and what needs to be finalized by day one, or can this be finalized the second week of class? And so that's something to think about when you have a graphic syllabi as well. Is this going to be a living document, or is this going to be the first day document? It's going to be finalized. You're going to have to sign it. This is what is expected of you, or can they have some time to think about that? Will they have time to maybe, putting them in groups, maybe making that an assignment on the first week of class, pairing them together, putting them in a different part of that content and moving it around. And so that way it's making it easier for them to understand and think about other ways that might be visually representative, especially in a class that you're going to have to obey for the whole semester. And so that's really important when I'm thinking about that. Here's my ideas and what I do with my class. An example of that is I welcome to the class, and I will say, welcome to class. This is LIBR 1100, go over the class. And then I have the next concept that we're going to learn the next week is what is information and what is information anxiety. That is week one. Once we build on those two concepts, where are we going next? We're going to, is all information valid? We're going to start learning about different types of sources, popular, scholar sources, etc. And then move to week three. Where do I find valid sources for my research paper? That's going to be starting to learn to use the library website. Think about including this type of structure, how one feeds into the next thing, and putting that into your course material can make all the difference, because it allows them to take these concepts and then break it down so that way they know where they're going and where they will be at the end of class. So that way each week one bleeds into the next concept. So I found this to be really helpful because students know what they're doing first and then doing second and third, etc. So that's really helped me. Another example that I've actually used this before is I've done getting to know your students, weeks 1 to 3. We start doing our cognitive development, have a process. I'll have, again, what is that going to look like for me in terms of what is information anxiety? What is information resources? If you're teaching a class that has to do with cognitive development, you might have something else that has to do with cognition and learning and motivation, behaviors, all of that. And then your next weeks are going to be designed and developed around those objectives that you had in your class. And then that's going to feed into each other again in 5 and 19 and 11. And then you're start going to having more your active learning, your course readings, your assignments, your assessments, any type of learning or that might be helpful. Just kind of drawing those arrows with connections, I think has been really helpful for me when I'm developing this together. More examples of that is the same thing, but just 3 and 4, what that might look like for my teaching and learning. And last is going to be that assessment period, or you can break it up if you're going to do quizzes or tests, but just making sure that they have the learning outcomes as well across from each other, so they know that this is connecting to one of our learning objectives that we talked about on the first day in the graphic syllabi, and having that all together to me has made a lot of sense. When I'm putting this together, I'm thinking about my framework. So I use a lot of Bloom's framework. So I use all of that knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis. I also looked at another framework that replaced words with like remember and synthesize. I also looked at Perry's framework for duality and commitment and some other concepts as well. I thought that was really important when I was going through that. Also thinking about for you all, you might look at these other frameworks. I often do a lot with Fink's framework. Really looking at that structuring and that sequencing. That really helped me thinking about the recalling and understanding the idea. One of the things with my students, especially in the Library 1100 class, is they're coming in from high school. And so you're having to figure out, really the knowledge and the skills there and what those requirements are for that particular class, and how can I break that down into words that they will understand, but not overwhelm them with the amount of content onto one page. So one of the things that I have is creating this content together and a QR code. And I also have as well, go back, sorry. And also working that from scratch. So what we're going to do is, if you want to have the QR code and kind of work with that, I'm going to go ahead and try to get that on the screen. And so that way that will go ahead and you can see that. So I'm going to pull it up and hopefully it'll work on my end and you can see that. But I'm going to pull that up again. So if you didn't have that or get it to the first time, they can go ahead and capture that. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up one more time in case that you guys got that there. So hopefully I'm looking at that. So I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize. It has been a Friday. Okay, I'm going to start sharing my screen again, and new share will be hopefully this one, and I'll share. So hopefully you get that particular QR code there. So hopefully everybody's getting that. If it doesn't work, I apologize because it worked for me earlier. And once you're there, I'm going to walk you through that since it's not, for some reason, not loading on my screen. But what I'm going to do is kind of show you a little bit about really working from what that is, because for some reason it's not showing up. So one of the things that I like to do with the Jamboard activity is, making sure that you have the arrows and those connections between each concept. So moving it around, you can also have, with my students, I have like sticky notes. So say, for example, that you have your statements that you have for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what you could do is pair with students into, say, different groups. They're going to take that one content there. And so what they're going to do is take that diversity statement, and then they're going to start, working through it and thinking, okay, what words are important? Can we put this into an image or things that I would understand? How can I connect this particular statement, and how can I put that that's knowledgeable for me? And so once, you can even have those type of images with all that block text, but what kind of stops other people from not having another visual type of representation that might, getting out that concept of mutual respect, for example, and circling that, what does respect look like, or other words that might be really important, and then putting that into the syllabi. Or, the flip side of that, if that person is also working with grading, how do you want the grading to look like? Are you okay with this being in the blocked text as is? Or should we put that into a pie chart? There's different ways, but I feel like with working with my students, the most important part of that and the key for me is really making sure that they're able to work together as a group. And I also have people from disability services who also come into the conversation when we're having this together into a Jamboard activity. So that way they're, making sure that, hey, does this look like it's ADA compliant? If there's somebody in the room for that, what changes can I make? And how can this be ADA compliant for every single person, but still be collaborative? And I think that so many times that when we're putting this together, it's making the headings not only your course title, but also putting, you have your course description, and it's oftentimes long, but what do you want students to know? And then once they have that information, they start breaking it down, they start circling it, putting different images, starting different pictures. And then once we all agree, we talk about it. I have Zoom cafes is what I like to call them. We have them if it's live, I've had it before in groups and breakout groups. So I'll have it group number 1. They're like, okay, so, what I put together was diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is what I found to be important. I use this image. I think that not only do we have the statement, but can we put this into our syllabus, since it's all about our class and communication and collaboration together. And so everybody would agree to that. And if you do have disagreements, we start, kind of working through that, why it's important to put that or not important for that image. in class. And then we start also thinking about your alt text. If you have somebody who is blind, how would they, correspond with that image you put for respect? And if you had a person who is maybe shaking hands with somebody else, how would you kind of put that into the alt text and put that into the syllabus? And I found that creating these different ways to get them involved with that and think outside the box has been really important. But they have, worked together to create something that is not only graphic, but also, built on ADA compliancy and also built on mutual respect. I have found that the students love it as a exercise, and it's not just, here's the syllabus, this is all we're going to do today, 20 minutes and you're done. I have found that if you get them to be interactive with that and you create these different opportunities, not only with the Word document and making it different sizes, so making it bigger and really adhering to all these rules, but also letting them have images and things that are important into the syllabus, I think has played a huge role into the respect part for my students. And I found that to be really successful. I really haven't had any difficulties with that in terms of, when I upload it into, because for us, we use Blackboard. I've used Canvas before on a different campus and a different university. So I've kind of used both of them when I'm working with different roles. But I have found that it hasn't really been any difficulty with that and uploading that. It's just been a process of making sure that it's all compliancy and that they are collaborative together. That's kind of the ways that I also can kind of work from scratch. If you want to capture that QR code there as well, and you want to use that. And if you have any problems accessing any of this information, just send me an email and then I can kind of walk you through that. For some reason, I'm not sure why it's not working on my end today. But this is my contact information, another QR code if you want to work more or talk more through these things with me. There's my email address and my phone number, and I'm happy to kind of help any way that I can. That's been a really new process for me for this semester. And this past semester, and I've really had to think through how I want this to look and feel. And I felt that it's been something through the research and going through all these processes, step 1, step 2, step 3, just in terms of, where you want to be with your class. What does it look like to you? What's important to you? What content is important, especially when you're drafting that yourself? And then, going through the compliancy with your organization and also going through those images, putting that together in a graphic format and collaborating with your students. And then, having somebody on board who's willing to come from the really disability office who comes with you that can help you through that and those images. I think it's been for me, it's been a great learning experience, but it's also give them choice in terms of creating that graphic syllabi together. So I hope this time was really good for you all and that you enjoyed this presentation, and reach out to me with any questions. Thank you all so much. Yeah, thank you all.
We have any questions, comments? I guess you explained everything perfectly.
Yeah, I hope it was a really good experience for you all. But I've just used Jamboard. I feel like Jamboards are really good to use, especially if you're taking those big texts and visualizing it together. So just a new experience.
Yeah, when we were talking earlier, usually going through the syllabus, the first class session just brings everybody down.
Yes.
And you have a hard time recapturing that enthusiasm for the course.
Yes.
anything to make it better.
Yeah, and I found that doing these activities together and actually going through that and pairing them up with people in class, not only does it start with choice, but it also allows them to meet other people in the class and make connections as well on that first day. So it's not just, you're losing an hour of your content on day one, you're actually having a meaningful activity, and they can actually refer that to, because this is our syllabus together that we created. And it's not just coming from me being like, this is what we're doing. This is all, signing it and that's it. There's going to be some choice in that. So I feel like using this graphic syllabi and then using also Jamboard really creates that activity that helps in the long run.
Okay, well, with no more comments, we'll bring it to a close then,
All
Amy.
right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much and have a
And
great
we've
day.
got- Yeah, we've got another session on top of the hour. Hope to see you guys there.